Now, we talked about data a lot. I mean, quite frankly, that's a part of both what we do within this ecosystem. And we talked about, you mentioned privacy. So I do want to get back to that because it's such a critical component. I'm might get you in trouble here. So, you can feel free to plead the fifth, even though there's no such thing as the fifth in Canada, actually. So, but that aside, it do you is privacy bring up privacy to not share uh, data between institutes or just share data in general so they can be used to improve clinic outcomes or outcomes for patients. Is that a red herring? Because people share the data all the time. Like I share my data Facebook, whatever it may be, constantly, right? And is it a red herring? How should we think about data privacy from the patient perspective, especially coming from, I think you said, the point of view from the financial world, where I do understand if you accidentally give up your credit card information, yeah, I mean, you're in a world of hurt there, right? It could be really, really, really bad from at least financial perspective. From the patient perspective, like how should we think about this? And I do bring up the word red herring a little bit as a devil's advocate, but feel free to take that question, go whichever way you want.
Yeah, I'll answer it happily because it's not a red herring. So let me unpack that a little bit. Um, Number one, privacy should be taken and be considered at the utmost importance. And it is. And yes, we share our information on Facebook. And yes, we all read, about, this credit card information or this social is being shared. But there has to be and should be a higher bar when it comes to our health information. And privacy matters, and it's important. And the ethics around it are important. And the evolving work in AI is important, and should be taken incredibly seriously in that spirit that it shouldn't be, doesn't have to be, nor when you speak to privacy commissioners across Canada with that context in mind, do they want it to be a barrier? So again, going back to, we embedded ourselves at a hospital, and we realized like this is really important, and it's prescribed. We've got authorities, we've got privacy legislation, we've got certain uses. There's a lot of rules and regulations that have been designed for the proper ethical handling of PHI, depending on the particular authority that you have. So, number one, if a patient consents to share their information, and that consent isn't a buried terms and conditions in an app, but they actually say, you know what, I want my information to be used for these purposes. There is no privacy, or I wouldn't say that is a particular authority, but that information can be shared because it ultimately belongs to the patient. Our first hire at Pentavere, again, contrarian to other startup type hires, was the former chief privacy officer at UHN, who was the chief privacy officer at TD Bank, who was a former regulator, who also, when you talk about why, gravitated to the mission of if we can unlock this information and what it can do to help patients. And we designed standard operating procedures, data handling. We put in all of these things, which was an investment, massive investment. But we put in all of these pieces up front, and that built trust. And then we were able to go to privacy commissions and say, here's our data, here's our flows, here's how we're doing it. Here's our thinking behind, here's the safeguards and protections we've put in place. And what you would find is that then became an accelerator to some of the work that we are doing today, which is, sharing data with the appropriate authorities in the appropriate ways to identify patients and provide that insight to various stakeholders so we can all close care gaps and improve outcomes together. So just framing it as a red herring, I think is my advice is it's not a red herring. Treat it the way it should be treated. And then you'd be surprised around, even with our sort of archaic legislation at times, the amount of things you can do. And I'll just finish off on this for the entrepreneurs listening, because sometimes what you most need resides in the place you least want to go. And what you think is your biggest impediment ends up being competitive advantage. So we've done a lot of this in Canada. And Canada does not have a reputation for being progressive or on the leading edge of taking risks with sharing data, especially sharing data with pharmaceutical companies, especially using AI. But we did it and satisfied those requirements. So as we're having conversations, let's say with global life science companies who are saying, how do we think about ex-USA data and creating centers of excellence? How do we think about GDPR? The fact that we've done these things under the Canadian framework, we actually moved to the top of the pecking order, being actually having an advantage to US vendors because they built their privacy models under HIPAA, which has a lower bar in certain areas. So this has ended up being an advantage to us that's allowing us to accelerate and scale now under the HealWell AI story, that you would think, because it's, some of the challenges would be an impediment. So I think that's an insight that we're really happy to share, and with this community, around privacy.